This quiet parlor still holds the echoes of 1,000 stories.
Hey guys, tonight we are going uptown. Back to the 1950s, but not the version you have seen 100 times, the one with the horns blaring out of a basement club and a story about struggle on every corner. No, tonight we are looking at the other side of that postcard too, the one nobody hands you first. The women with the mink stoles and the brownstones on Sugar Hill, the household staff, the charge accounts at the good stores on 125th Street, and sometimes downtown too, whether downtown wanted their money or not. Rich women in 1950s Harlem. Not the singers, not the names you already know. Just quietly, deliberately comfortable women living in limestone houses on Edgecombe Avenue and Convent Avenue, with a husband who is a doctor or a dentist or a judge, with nothing but time, expectations, and a very long list of who is watching standing between them and a full psychological crisis. Before we go any further, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. And if there is a topic you have been dying for me to cover, drop it in the comments. Someone suggested tonight's topic, and I genuinely love you for it. It keeps this whole thing going. Also, if you prefer to drift off on Spotify, the link is in the description. We're over there too now. So find your platform, find your pillow, and let's get into it. Now dim those lights, turn on a fan if you have one, pull that blanket up, get horizontal, take a breath, and let the day go, because tonight you are not going to need any of it. But first, have you ever wondered what it actually looked like to be rich, black, and female in Harlem in 1954? Like, what did you do all day when you had a cook, a housekeeper, a nanny, a husband with his name painted in gold on a brownstone office door 2 blocks away, and a calendar that belonged less to you than it belonged to the entire uptown social world watching to see if you would slip? Did you just sit there? Was there a schedule? Did anyone ever crack behind all that composure? Was there an actual system for deciding how many teas, how many luncheons, how many committee meetings a woman could sit through before she lost the will to speak? Did you have opinions about the way the world was arranged for you, above you, and around you, that you were never once permitted to say out loud in mixed company? Did you pour your entire inner life into the perfect polish on a silver tea service and call it fulfillment? Were you bored? Were you brilliant? Were you both at once in a house that smelled like Chanel No. 5 and quiet exhaustion? Were you carrying, underneath every white glove and every practiced laugh, the weight of being told, constantly, in 1,000 small ways, that your comfort was an argument you had to keep winning? Congratulations, you have just woken up in 1953. You're wearing a silk robe your husband bought you in New York, not Paris, because he wanted the receipt to be local. Your hair was wrapped last night. Your children are with the nurse. And there is absolutely nothing on your schedule today except everything that is expected of you. And one thing more that white downtown women never had to think about before their coffee even cooled. You do not simply wake up as a wealthy black woman on Sugar Hill in 1953. You emerge, carefully, the way a photograph emerges in a dark room, one careful layer at a time, until the picture is exactly what it needs to be. The alarm goes off at 6:30, earlier than you would like to admit to your friends downtown, because there is more to assemble here than they will ever understand. Or perhaps the housekeeper knocks softly and brings the tray up herself because that is simply how the house runs. Or perhaps you wake because your body was trained years ago by a mother who was trained by her mother to rise before the day can catch you unprepared. And what follows is not a mourning so much as an inheritance. The face must be done before the children see you, before the cook sees you, before your husband, freshly shaved and already thinking about his first patient, glances up from the newspaper and takes his silent inventory of whether the house, meaning you, is in order. The hair, wrapped the night before under a silk scarf so it would not lose its press against the pillow, must be gently unwound and coaxed into the soft, exact wave that says, without a single word, that you have mastered something the world insists you were never given the tools to master. The robe comes off and the house dress goes on, but not just any house dress, the pressed one, the one with the covered buttons, the one that says, I am at leisure, but I am still formidable. I am still exactly who they said I could never be. By the time you arrive in the breakfast room, you have spent close to an hour on your face and your hair, and you have made approximately 0 decisions of consequence, and yet you have already, before 8 in the morning, done a piece of labor that no one downtown will ever put a name to. The products alone are their own quiet ritual and their own quiet economy. Cold cream first, worked in slow circles because the skin must never be dragged, only coaxed. A toner on a cotton round. A foundation shade mixed and remixed over the years, sometimes blended from 2 bottles because no drugstore on 125th Street or on 5th Avenue had quite gotten it right yet, and you were not going to walk out of the house wrong. Powder set with a puff, patted, never rubbed. A careful, patient brow pencil line. Lipstick, the exact shade you have worn for years, chosen the way you choose everything, on purpose, because correctness is not something you set down on a Tuesday. Correctness is the armor you put on before the world tries anything. The hair is its own long chapter, longer than anyone outside this world understands. Maybe you go to the shop on Sunday for the wash and the press with the hot comb, heated on the stove, drawn through section by section, by a woman who has known your scalp for 15 years and who talks to you the entire time about her daughter's wedding and Mrs. Whitfield's new car and whether the minister's sermon ran too long, and this is its own kind of church, its own kind of confession booth, hidden inside an errand that looks, from the outside, like nothing more than vanity. Or maybe your own housekeeper does the touch-ups between visits, the two of you in the upstairs bathroom with the door closed, the smell of pressing oil warm in the air, and there is an intimacy in that hour that neither of you names but both of you understand. The set from last night is released, brushed, shaped into the soft roll at the crown, the gentle wave over the temple, and then a light mist of spray, applied from a careful distance, because stiff is the enemy, stiff is the woman who is trying too hard, and you are never, ever trying too hard, even though you have been at this mirror since sunrise with the focus of a surgeon, even though the effort behind the appearance of no effort is, itself, the entire art form. Then the dress, chosen the night before, is laid out by the housekeeper or by you, because some women on the Hill insist on choosing their own clothes, even with staff in the house, a small private rebellion nobody else will ever notice. It is belted because everything was belted in 1953, because a waist is a kind of moral position that a woman is quietly required to hold. You check your reflection once, and then again, and then a third time in the hall mirror on your way down, because there will be eyes on you today that you cannot predict and cannot afford to disappoint, eyes that belong to your own community and eyes that belong to the other one, the downtown one, the one that is always half watching to see whether you deserve what you have. By the time you arrive at the breakfast table, it is nearly 8. Your husband is already there, reading the Amsterdam news with his coffee, or he is already gone, off to the office 2 blocks over, where his name sits in gold on the glass. And either situation requires its own careful management, its own tone, its own version of you. The coffee is poured, the children, dressed by the nurse in their good clothes for the private day school that took years of careful, deliberate campaigning to get them into, are brought down to say good morning before they are walked or driven the short distance to school. Your husband looks up from the paper and asks, out of habit more than curiosity, whether the Lynx meeting is still Thursday, and you say yes, of course, as if it were ever in question, as if the entire architecture of the week did not depend on you remembering exactly which afternoon belongs to which obligation. He finishes his coffee, kisses your cheek, not your mouth, because mornings in this house are not for that kind of tenderness, and he is gone, out the door and down the brownstone steps, off to see to bodies that need mending or papers that need arguing, off into a version of the world that is his and only partly, glancingly, yours. And you sit there a moment longer at the table with the good china, the same china your mother-in-law gave you at the wedding, with a look that was somehow both a blessing and a warning, and you take one long breath before the house, and the day, and everyone in it, remembers that you exist, and starts asking things of you. This is the baseline. This is before the staff meetings, before the children come home wanting things explained, before the first of the day's social obligations arrives with its own requirements and its own unspoken rules, and before the particular Harlem arithmetic begins, the one where you must be beautiful enough for the ball at the Renaissance casino, modest enough for the deaconesses at church, generous enough for the fundraiser, sharp enough for the bridge table, warm enough for the neighbors, and utterly, permanently unshakable in front of anyone downtown who might use even a flicker of doubt against the whole of what your husband, and his father before him, and the entire fragile, hard-won world of Sugar Hill spent 2 generations building brick by brick, deed by deed, dollar by careful dollar. By 9 o'clock, the house itself begins to ask things of you, not loudly. Nothing in this house is ever loud, but there is a particular quiet knock the housekeeper uses when she wants to discuss the week's marketing, meaning the groceries, meaning what the cook will need from the market on 125th Street, meaning whether the Thursday dinner for 8 will call for the good linens or the everyday good linens, because there is a difference, and everyone in the house understands the difference without it ever being explained. You sit at the small desk in the morning room, the one with the leather blotter and the fountain pen your husband gave you for your anniversary, and you go over the household accounts, not because you distrust the housekeeper, you trust her more than you trust most of the women you will smile at this afternoon, but because a woman in this position keeps her own books, quietly, carefully, the way her mother taught her, the way the women before her mother had to learn out of necessity before it ever became a habit passed down as wisdom. There is a rent roll, if the family owns the building next door, which many families on the Hill quietly do, income that never makes it into the conversation at parties, but keeps the whole enterprise afloat. There is the cook's list, the housekeeper's list, the nurse's schedule, and the question of whether the good silver needs polishing before Thursday, or whether it can wait until the girl comes on Tuesday. None of this looks like power from the outside. All of it is power, exercised in a register so quiet that most of the men in your life, including the one you married, would be surprised to learn how much of the machinery runs through your hands. At 10, the telephone starts. This is Harlem, and Harlem in 1953 talks on the telephone the way a river talks to its banks, constantly and always moving. Mrs. Powell is calling about the Lynx tea. Mrs. Buchanan is calling about the debutante committee, because the cotillion season is coming, and someone has to decide months in advance whose daughters will be presented, and in what order, and wearing whose family's pearls. And this is not gossip, or it is not only gossip, it is also a kind of governance, a way the community decides quietly who belongs where, and who is rising, and who, gently, needs to be reminded of her place. Someone calls about the NARC fundraiser, because half the women on this street sit on some committee or another. The Lynx, the girlfriends, the church auxiliary, the school board of the private academy, and the committees themselves are a kind of second marriage, demanding, exacting, occasionally more honest than the first one, because at least at committee, everyone admits they are there to work. You take these calls standing at the hall table, one hand resting on the newel post, the cord stretched as far as it will reach, and you say yes, and of course, and how wonderful, and I will have to check my calendar, even though you already know your calendar the way you know your own face, and this performance of slight, gracious uncertainty is itself a kind of manners, a way of never appearing too eager, too available, too easily gotten. Because a woman who is too available is a woman with nothing else going on, and nothing else going on is the one thing you can never, ever appear to have, even on the days when it is entirely, achingly true. By 11, if it is a Tuesday, you are dressing again, a full change from the house dress into something appropriate for daytime callers, because calling hours still mean something on the hill, even as the younger women whisper that the custom is old-fashioned, and you go back up to the mirror you left an hour and a half ago, and you check the hair again, dab the lipstick again, and you wonder, briefly, privately, in the one unguarded second the mirror allows you, what it would be like to simply stay in the house dress all day and let the hill think whatever it wants to think. The thought passes. It always passes. You were not raised to let a thought like that win. The late morning belongs to errands, if you can call them that, though the word barely fits what actually happens. You are driven, if the family has a car and a man to drive it, or you walk yourself in good shoes down to 125th Street, past the Theresa Hotel where every important person who ever came through Harlem, and a good number who came through Broadway too, stayed because downtown wouldn't have them, past Blumstein's department store, where you shop because it is Harlem's store, because it is a point of pride, because you remember, and everyone remembers, the boycotts a few years back that finally forced the store to hire black clerks behind its own counters. And there is a particular satisfaction in handing your charge card to a young woman who looks like your own daughter might look one day, and watching her ring up the sale with the same practiced ease any downtown clerk would use. You buy gloves. You buy a hat you did not strictly need. You stop in at the beauty parlor for 10 minutes just to have your hair checked, not touched, checked, because a woman on the hill develops an instinct for exactly how long a set will hold, and she is never, ever caught unprepared. And everywhere you go, the eyes are there, both kinds, the approving ones from your own world, and the harder, more complicated ones from beyond it, the ones that follow you into a downtown shop on the rare afternoon you venture there for something Blumstein's simply does not carry, the ones that watch your gloved hand set down cash or credit with a flicker of surprise that never quite disappears no matter how many times they see it. You have learned, the way every woman on the hill has learned, to meet that flicker with nothing at all, no defiance, no apology, just the same unbothered, perfectly composed face you wear to church, because giving them a reaction is its own kind of defeat, and you were raised, and married, and dressed every single morning, specifically not to hand anyone that particular victory. Lunch, if it happens at home, is light, taken alone or with whichever friend has dropped by, at the small table in the sunroom, overlooking the tiny back garden that took the gardener 3 seasons to get right, in a city that does not particularly want to grow anything. If it happens out, it happens at a luncheon. One of the endless rotating luncheons that make up the connective tissue of the entire hill. At someone's home this time, next month at another's, always with the good china out and always with a slightly competitive undertone running beneath every compliment about the tablecloth, or the little sandwiches, or the sherry. You sit with women you have known since finishing school, or since your daughters were in the same carriage together on Convent Avenue, or since you both joined the same sorority at Howard or Fisk decades ago, and you talk, carefully, about the cotillion, about the minister's health, about whose husband is being considered for a judgeship, about the new family that just bought the brownstone on St. Nicholas Place, and whether they will fit in. And underneath every sentence runs the same quiet current that runs under everything on the hill. The awareness that all of this, the china, the sherry, the committees, the careful accumulation of respectability, was built by people who were told for generations that none of it was meant for them, and every single luncheon is, whether anyone says so out loud, a small continued act of proving that wrong. There is laughter at these luncheons, real laughter, the kind that comes easily among women who have known each other for 30 years and buried each other's mothers and stood as godmothers to each other's children. And there is also, always, the low hum of appraisal, the sideways glance at whose dress is new, whose husband's practice is thriving, whose son got into which college up north, whose daughter is being talked about, kindly or otherwise, as a candidate for the cotillion. You have learned to hold your face in the pleasant, interested arrangement that gives nothing away, the same arrangement your own mother wore, and her mother before that. Women who understood, long before you did, that composure was not vanity. It was survival, dressed up as manners. By mid-afternoon, if it is a committee day, you are at the church hall or at someone's parlour with the other women of the links or the girlfriends or the fundraising committee for the scholarship fund, going through business with a seriousness that would surprise anyone who has never sat in that room. Minutes are read, amounts are discussed. Someone proposes that the spring benefit be held at the Renaissance instead of the smaller hall, and there is a genuine, spirited debate about cost and prestige and whether the extra expense is worth what it signals to the rest of the community. This work matters, and everyone in the room knows it matters, because the money raised sends someone's daughter to Spelman and pays for the boy down the block to have his tonsils out, and keeps the doors of the settlement house open through another hard winter. And there is a particular pride in doing this work well, in being known as a woman who gets things done, and not merely a woman who attends. You leave these meetings a little taller than you arrived, the one part of the day that asks you to be capable rather than merely lovely, and you carry that particular satisfaction home with you like a small, private secret. The children come home from school by 3, delivered by the nurse or walked home by the older ones themselves now that they are old enough, and there is a brief, real, unguarded hour where you are simply a mother, asking about arithmetic and asking who sat next to whom at lunch. And this hour, more than any other in the day, belongs entirely to you, uncomplicated by committees or calling cards or the ever-present question of what the Hill will think. You sit with your daughter while she practices piano, badly, cheerfully, and you correct her posture the way your own mother corrected yours. And for a little while, the whole enormous architecture of the day falls away, and there is only the small, ordinary miracle of a child getting a scale right on the 3rd try. But the hour ends, as it always ends, because there is a dinner tonight. There is almost always a dinner, and by 5 o'clock you are back at the vanity for the 3rd full transformation of the day, because the woman who greets afternoon callers is not the woman who receives guests at 8, and everyone on the Hill can tell the difference, even if they would never say so. The good jewellery comes out of the safe, the strand your husband gave you when his practice finally turned the corner into real prosperity, the ring that belonged to his mother, and that you have never quite decided if you love or merely respect. The dress for tonight was chosen days ago, pressed, hung, waiting, because a woman who arrives underdressed at her own dinner table has failed at something no one will name directly, but everyone will remember. Downstairs, the cook has been at the stove since noon, and the smells drifting up the back stairs, if you allow yourself to notice them at all in the middle of getting dressed, are extraordinary. Roast and something with a good dark gravy, and a dessert that took the better part of the afternoon, because entertaining well is its own quiet competition, and every hostess on the Hill knows exactly whose table is the best table, even if none of them would ever say it aloud over dinner itself. Your husband comes home at 6, later some nights when a patient runs long, and by then you are dressed and composed and standing at the top of the stairs the way you have stood there 1,000 times before, and he looks up at you the way he did the very first time, or close enough to it, and for one unguarded second before the guests arrive and the whole performance of the evening begins. You are not the woman managing the linens or the committee minutes or the careful arithmetic of who sits where. You are simply his wife, and he is simply glad to see you, and that particular flicker of feeling, small and real and entirely unwitnessed by the Hill, is worth more to you some nights than every strand of pearls in the safe upstairs. The guests arrive at 8, the other doctors and their wives, a judge and his wife, perhaps a visiting professor from one of the Negro colleges down south passing through New York, perhaps a musician if your husband's tastes run that direction, though the truly grand parties, the ones with Ellington himself at the piano, belong more to legend now than to any given Tuesday. Cocktails in the front parlour, the good glasses out, the conversation moving easily between the state of the practice, the state of the church, the state of the country, because in this room, unlike almost any other room in the city, the men and women speak of politics together, of the fight still being fought downtown and in Washington, of a name in the paper that means something more here than it will mean anywhere else in Manhattan tonight. You move through the room the way you were trained to move through a room, refilling a glass here, steering a conversation there, making certain the judge's wife, who can be difficult, feels sufficiently attended to, making certain no silence lasts longer than it should. Dinner is served at 9, the good china finally justified, the cook's afternoon of labour finally rewarded in the compliments that circle the table, and you sit at the foot while your husband sits at the head, and you preside over your portion of the table the way generals preside over a flank, watching for a glass that needs filling, a conversation that has gone too quiet, a guest who has had one sherry too many and needs, gently, to be steered toward the coffee. This is its own kind of skill, invisible to anyone who has not tried it, the art of running an evening so smoothly that no one at the table ever once suspects how much running is involved. By 11, the guests are gone, the coats retrieved, the last car pulling away from the curb, and the house exhales the way it always does after company. The good glasses left for the girl to wash in the morning, the good china stacked and covered. Your husband loosens his collar and tells you, in the particular tired, satisfied voice he uses only at this hour, that it went well, that the judge seemed pleased, that his colleague from Washington will remember this house fondly, and you accept the compliment the way you accept everything, gracefully, because you know, even if he does not entirely know, exactly how much of the evening's success was built by your hands, your calendar, your careful weeks of planning, disguised as an ordinary Thursday. Upstairs, finally, the hair comes back down, the pins set aside for tomorrow's wrap, the good jewellery returned to its box, the face washed clean with the same cold cream that started the day 16 hours ago, and there is a strange, quiet symmetry in that, the same ritual bookending both ends of a day that asked so much of you and will ask the same of you again tomorrow, and the day after, and every day after that, for as long as you hold this particular position, on this particular street, in this particular, hard-won corner of the city. You lie down finally, the house settling around you, the children asleep down the hall, your husband's breathing already slowing beside you, and in the dark, in the 1 hour that belongs to no one's calendar but your own, you allow yourself to feel the whole of it at once, the pride and the exhaustion, the genuine love for this life you built with your own 2 hands, even while it was busy building you into something the rest of the country still could not quite decide how to see. You think perhaps of your mother, who scrubbed floors so that you would never have to, and of your daughter down the hall, who will inherit this house and this street and this particular, exquisite burden of being watched, and you wonder, the way you wonder most nights right before sleep finally takes you, whether she will carry it the way you did, or whether one day a woman on this street will simply get to rest without first having to prove, in every gesture and every gown and every perfectly poured cup of coffee, that she has earned the right to. And on that thought, or somewhere just past it, sleep finally comes, the way it always eventually comes, even to a woman whose entire day was a performance of never once looking tired.